Hello friends, and welcome to my final video of 2025, and I feel like the most fitting way to leave off 25 is to talk about my favorite books from the year. So I've gathered a list of my top 10 with an honorable mention or two, and also there's some exceptions because some of these spots I left for entire series. Anyways, without further ado, let's talk about my favorite books of 2025. Okay, so let's kick things off actually with a contemporary romance series. We have Rewind It Back by Liz Tom 40. I finished the Windy City series this year. Rio is essentially the funny side character the whole time, and he has been the single one this whole time. He's just been watching all of his friends drop like flies to the love bug, and he is just waiting for his turn. Watching him actually finally fall in love and the feelings that he had around that were incredible. The way that I keep thinking about the sentiment in this book, it may have taken me a while to get here, but how lucky am I to have been here to watch all of my friends fall in love? How lucky am I? I think there is such a privilege. Like, yes, he might have been the last one to arrive, but ultimately he was privileged, and he felt privileged to watch all of his friends fall in love and to be part of their stories and to be in the community that he is in. And I just thought that that was such a beautiful sentiment. And that sentiment just keeps repeating in my head, and I love it. So technically this is our honorary number 11 on this list. However, I really need to reread the series. And I will read anything that Liz Tom 40 writes in the future. Thank you so much. And then we have a book that I just don't understand why I didn't give it a 5-star. Like, I don't get it. Empire the Vampire. So in this book, we are following Gabriel, the Silver Saint, which is kind of, essentially a vampire hunter, you could say. We follow him throughout different parts in his life. He's currently telling his story to the vampire that has captured him. So we know that he is currently captured, but we are following him throughout different points of his life. Through his childhood, through his adulthood, back into his adolescence, and we kind of flow in and out of different points of his life. So the creativity in which the story is told here, but then also just the story itself was incredible. One of the driving factors of this story is Gabriel. He's at a midpoint in his life in which he has been beyond devout his entire life, and something happens to make him question everything. And now once you are dealing with this loss of religion, this loss of a guiding force, what do you do? Where do you go from here? What's going on? And so watching him start to navigate that process, as well as going back to see what took him there, this is a very incredibly character-driven story, and moving on. And then we had a book that I read fairly recently-ish that I was not expecting to like it as much. We have Nocticadia by Carrie Lake. Now, I read and actually DNF'd Anathema at the beginning of this year. So when it came to trying Nocticadia, I didn't really have too many hopes. I listened to audiobook for this one. First of all, the audiobook production for this, incredible. Second of all, I think that I absolutely read this book at the perfect time. I was in the mood for it, and it hit the way that it needed to. Our female main character, Lilia, we meet her when she is writing a research paper for her school in which she is describing this fictional illness. Okay, it's a creative writing assignment, right? Well, except for the fact that it's not a creative writing assignment because her mother actually suffered from this illness, and this illness is not very commonly talked about. However, there is one place where it is very uniquely researched, and that is none other than Nocticadia University. So she ends up getting her paper forwarded to Nocticadia, and they're like, this girl seems to know what she's talking about. Maybe we should bring her into the fold. And some questions come to light, some secrets come to light. However, we have a professor in this book who I wasn't anticipating to like. There are definitely some dark romance elements to this book that if somebody were to just tell you some of the things that happened without the context, you'd be like, huh? However, I had the context, and I was down bad. This book is dark. This book is spicy. This book has some really interesting scientific elements to it that I actually like. Definitely check out your trigger warnings here. Okay, this book has them all over it. However, for me, in the time that I read it, it just hit exactly the way that I needed it to, and I was glad that I picked it up. Then we have The Poisoner by Ivy Ophelia. Okay, my greatest regret in the entire world is that I didn't order a physical copy of this suitor because I ordered it, and unfortunately it went out of print and out of stock right as I ordered it. So I don't actually have a copy of the indie edition, though I think I would sell my soul to have one because I love this. I love this book. I actually have similar feelings to The Poisoner as I did with Nocticadia, in that I read them exactly at the right time in which I wanted something a little bit darker, and they just scratched the itch that I needed them to scratch at the time. However, The Poisoner is a really interesting conceptualization of vampires. I don't want to give away the full details about the creature, but we do in fact have two points of view here, we have the creature and then we have the poisoner. Now the poisoner is our female main character, Alina. She owns an apothecary. She is a scientist at heart. Her father taught her everything that he knew, and she has continued to take that knowledge and expand upon it. This book is kind of a more Regency style setting, which is interesting in this context. Our female main character, she goes to a party that her bestie just drug her to. She happens to see something in the corner happening and she's like, huh? What she saw was in fact the creature. Now the creature is our vampire in the story. I thought he was such an interesting part of this story. Not only his lore and the details about him, but the way that he and Alina interacted. She is very much so aware of what he is and the fact that he is bad and she should not be interested. And she's like, no, thank you. But somehow, even when he is stalking her, he is bringing her prizes, we can say, and he is doing, you know, overall things that one would expect a really dark vampire to do. She's still questioning, why am I kind of into it? Like, this idea of this is really bad and I know that this is bad, but like, why am I blushing? Like, what's going on here? I thought that that was such an interesting back and forth that we had throughout this entire book. The plot also was interesting though. Like, the romance itself was definitely the main part of the story, but the plot is starting to kick off and we leave off in book 1 at a point where I need book 2. So this book is getting republished in January and I need the Arachnid. I really thought the Arachnid was coming out right after I read The Poisoner, and it is in fact not, so I need it immediately. But this was a very, very easy 5-star for me and I had just such a fun time with it and I'm so glad that I read it. Now I don't mean to diminish the 5-starness of any of these books, but I feel like 2025 was definitely a year of maybe less than stereotypical 5 stars. A lot of books were just kind of vibes. A lot of books were just kind of right book, right moment. If I were to have read most of these books at any other time, I might have not given them a 5-star. However, I did. And one really good example of that is Spark the Flames by Ivy Asher. This book was so, yet again, so much fun. Exactly the thing that I needed, but I also feel like there are certain elements of this book that were completely written for me. Those elements being, number 1, we have dragons. Starting off really strong there, okay? We have an urban setting. We're doubling off a really urban setting. Then we also have some sci-fi elements, given that this is in a really modern urban setting. We have a found family. We have more of a military style elements to this. We've got different types of dragons. We've got like a secret history, past thing that's going on. Like, there are so many details about this book that were so incredibly fun to me. Ivy Asher is an author that when I read this book, I immediately need to go read a whole bunch of other things by Ivy Asher, and I ended up reading Rabid and I read The Lost and the Chosen. Now, neither of those 2 books were just like incredible to me. However, this one was. We have our female main character who is kind of on the run after being captured and tortured for a little bit. So like, that's kind of casual. So she ends up running into this group of dragon shifters who kind of take her into safety, but she's really not wanting to be captured by them because she's hiding some things. We start to find out what she's hiding. We start to get some plot. We start to get little details of things that are happening in this world very vaguely. I think that some of the more sciencey elements of this world made what she was doing a little bit more challenging than the ending. Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. This book was once again get a very easy 5-star for me. Okay, now we're getting into some of the books that you may or may not already know that are on this list. We have Sunrise on the Reaping. What's funny about Sunrise on the Reaping, there's kind of a dissonance in my brain between me being like, oh yeah, that was a really good book, and also me not being interested in it at all. Like, this is the kind of book where I think in my heart of hearts, the Hunger Games franchise as a whole has had a very large impact on my life. However, I think that at a certain point, I had kind of detached myself from that fandom just because I was so in it for so long, and it felt like junior high me a little bit. Like, I felt like we had moved on. We'd closed off that chapter, we put in a pin in it, and I was off onto other things. So when Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes came out, I wasn't just like, oh yay, like goody, another book. I kind of was just like, oh, that's cool, I'll go watch the movie. So I went and watched the movie and it was incredible. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. So then whenever Sunrise on the Reaping came out, given that it was about a character, Haymitch specifically, that I just wanted more details from, I knew that I needed to read that book first. I read the book. I bawled like a little baby. What's funny to me, I still don't think of it, like in my head, I almost think of it as a 4-star, but I had such an emotional reaction to it that couldn't be anything other than a 5-star. The new details about how the entire society was built and how the results of previous games, how those things in the past then developed into the Hunger Games that Katniss later saw. It is so incredible going back and watching the past, watching how all of these events developed into what it is, and watching the society evolve along with it. It's a little crazy, and it's also a little scary in today's current time. Like, I think is so relevant. There's so much commentary in the entirety of the Hunger Games that is so unfortunately relevant in a lot of ways. I just think it's what Suzanne Collins did with the original trilogy incredible. And then we get into reading President Snow's backstory. Incredible. And then Haymitch. I know that whenever the movie comes out and I have to relive that experience, I'm gonna need to bring like a mop with me or something to, you know, mop up all the tears, because I'm just gonna lose it and I feel it. So I think that I had the most emotional, like if I had to give an award for the most emotional experience, the most number of tears shed, it would be between Sunrise on the Reaping and a book we'll talk about here in a second. So while I don't necessarily just think of this book as being a 5-star, this book so very validly deserves its place on this list. There are 2 things that I look for in my romantasy series. Number 1, romance. When we talk about the Fever series, we talk about slow burn books, right? Usually when we talk about slow burn, it's like the end of book 1, maybe into book 2, and maybe for feeling crazy into book 3. I have never read a series that the slow burn takes until really book 4 and we don't really get to see the couple actually be together until book 5. That is insanity to me. The amount of work that I had to put in to finally get the payoff, insanity. But I think that being said, it was still really interesting and fun and fresh to watch these characters interact, because by my definition, them actually being together happened much later, but we definitely see some inklings. We see some things. We have seen some things by this book. I have never felt so enraptured by a romance before, and just absolutely needing and the longing, the tension that I personally needed to happen was insanity. Then number 2, we have the fantasy. Now this is a book series that was written in the early 2000s. I think it's really interesting to see some of the tropes, themes, things, particular scenes that are happening in this book, see how that's being done in the current publishing environment. However, there are definite things in this series that, because this is an early 2000s, much older series, these books do not follow the current trends. It is so interesting to see. It really scratches my brain on some of these things that happen, how maybe I would expect it to go, but because it's not current, like it just does a complete different thing that you would expect it to based on current stuff. So I really appreciate the series for that perspective as well. I think that the lore in this world is also really interesting, and where we leave off, we have been looking for answers this whole freaking time, and when we finally start to see some of those answers in the final book, Shadow Fever, incredible. I say final given that this is the first installment in this greater Fever series. Like the Fever series is like 1 million books long. The first 5 books are from Mac's perspective, so this kind of is the natural end to the first installment, if you will. I have so many questions still that I would love to have answered later. This series is absolutely one of my all-time favorite series. I loved it. Like it was truly incredible. And if you haven't already read it, you definitely need to. I think if you read a book here and there, it doesn't quite hit the exact same, so I would definitely recommend a series binge for this one. And then we have the Lady of Darkness series. This is a 5-book series set in Melissa K. Rorick's world of chaos. I'm definitely so excited now, having read the series first, to read the Legacy series. Like, okay. I would say overall the book that actually makes this list is Lady of Shadows. Listen, I love a healing story. I love a healing moment. I also think that this book was the best that we saw the main couple at, because as the series continues to go on, not that I fell out of love with the main couple, but I think they kind of became the old married couple in the midst of watching a whole bunch of other really interesting side characters. I have particular favorites. I'm absolutely feral for the 3rd series that Melissa K. Rourke just announced, and I need to read it, but I also really want to read the Legacy series first, so that's a TBD. However, for the Lady of Darkness series, I would say that this overall is more of a 4-star series for me. It's not a 5-star series. However, there were so many incredible moments. We're following our female main character, Scarlet, who is an assassin. She's essentially the ward of the assassin leader, we could call him, and she has a really tragic event occur. So she's kind of behind locked doors. She is mourning. She is absolutely grieving, and she's done. She's out. She's done. However, she gets assigned a job. She is told, hey, if you do this job, I'll set you free. And she's like, okay, great, cool. So she decides to take the job against her better judgment, and things happen from there. She happens to meet some people. She finds out some secrets. The world continues to evolve from there. We find out more about her past. We find more about the greater world. We get more characters. We see a found family start to emerge. And then we also, as the series goes on, we see these characters have their own moments. I love where we went with the characters here. Our main couple had some really incredible moments, and then they kind of got to take back seat so that we could have some other really incredible, there's one particular couple, I'm feral for them. Like, I'm absolutely so down bad for them, it's not even funny. But I also think that where the plot in this series goes is really interesting. As we started to get closer to the end of these books, we started to get more plot and more plot and more of how this magic work, and I was like, wait, am I like, what's happening? So I think that I also would benefit from a reread of the series, to be honest. The way that the plot just continues to snowball and the magic system and the world building continue to snowball, insanity. I do definitely think that this series is going to be for some people and not necessarily for others. I think this was kind of a 4-star series for me. I had fun. There are particular moments that I like more than others, though. That being said, the series definitely has to rank on this list. And then we have one of the most fun book releases that I have experienced in a hot minute. We have Onyx Storm. I think that I'm kind of actually struggling with where to place this book on this list because this is not a completed series. And you guys know, I keep talking about Nini completing series. We're getting some really interesting character development as the series continues on, but the plot, honestly, for me, is what I'm invested in at the moment. I think that there are not as many stories about dragons that have this kind of dragon lore behind it quite like this series does. So I'm invested. I just want to know more, and the fantasy reader in me is having a really fun time with this, but I think the fantasy reader in me is also kind of holding back because I know that the way that the structure of the series goes, we're not getting any of the details just yet. Like, we're just touching on it, and I need more. So I think that's also part of why when I look at this book, I'm not like, this is my favorite book in the world, because I think I'm reserving. I A, don't want to be disappointed, and B, I feel like we just haven't gotten there yet. So I'm definitely intrigued to see as the series goes on. We have book 3 in this dragon riding military academy situation kind of world. Yet again, I love a dragon. I love an academy setting. I love magic. The romance is just continuing to develop in a really fun way. This release in and of itself was such a fun time on top of the book itself. I read it in like 2 days. And this is one of those books that just makes you glad to be a reader. Like, being part of the fandom, I love it. Like, I just want to have fun, and I want to talk about books with all my friends. And I think that's exactly what the series does. Okay, we're getting into the last 2 technically books here on this list. We have at number 2, we have a book that was kind of a surprise to me. Surprising in the fact that I can't believe this is ranking so high on this list. But like, I also literally can, because we have Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I listened to the audiobook for this one, and if you are at all interested in reading this audiobook, 1000%. I think especially if you're newer to sci-fi, there's just some things that we explore in this book that I think the story is told in a really imaginative way via listening to it, and the way that the audio production of the book is. We're following our main male character, Rylan Grace. We meet him when he realizes that he is alone on a spaceship, you know, in space. He doesn't really know why he's here. He doesn't know his name. It takes him a couple minutes to even figure out what his name is. He doesn't know what's going on. He just wakes up in a white room and is like, hello. So we start to figure out some details about where he is now, and then we start to get flashbacks into how he got here. And the flashback element of the story, I think, was actually done really well. In the current timeline, he is literally just trying to figure out the next thing. He doesn't know what's going on. He has no idea where he is, so he's just trying to figure out where he is, what his purpose is, how to even get out of this mess, like what's going on. And then we get to a flashback. The way that the flashbacks are actually done feel very natural. It doesn't feel like this like disjointed story. It just feels like we're telling a story in a really interesting way. And you find out some things, okay? I think that ultimately, while this is sci-fi, this is a very character-driven sci-fi, and if you are a character-driven person, you're gonna love it. There is some plot here, but I think that the overall plot revolves around this person who has a question and he needs to answer it. Oh wait, there's a new question, gotta answer it. You don't need to know much about space. This is the kind of book and the kind of story that could go one of 2 ways. Number 1, it makes you feel dumb, but I think because you're in the head of this scientist who knows what he's doing to an extent, but he's also just like, WTF is happening, you're actually working through the problems with him, and because he's taking you on this problem-solving journey, it makes you feel smart, okay? And I love to feel smart, like, what can I say? We get these adverse situations thrown at him left and right, and while he's working his way through it, we start to get some cameos to him, and we start to get little kernels that make us care about him even more, and the way that the story just evolves is incredible. And I think that there are some really big spoilers in this book that make it just even more incredible. So if you are at all interested in the story and getting the full amount of appreciation, honestly, I would read this book before the movie comes out, number 1, but I would also try to read this book before the movie trailers come out. I've heard conversations about certain things that are in the trailers, and I honestly would say you need to be as blind as possible before you pick this book up if you were at all interested in reading it. But overall, I had a really fun time. And if it wasn't for our next book, this book would be my favorite book book of the year. Interrupting your regularly scheduled programming to tell you that since filming this video Saturday, I've actually read a book that's actually my favorite of the year. We'll talk about it. Stay tuned. Our next book actually being 2 books because I literally can't decide. I mean, I think I might be able to decide between the 2 of them, which is my favorite, but we have Children of Fallen Gods and Mother of Death and Dawn by Carissa Broadbent. If you're new to my channel, hi, welcome, and these are my favorite books ever. I feel like if you're not new to my channel, you have heard me talk ad nauseum about these books. I read Daughter of No Worlds last year and I bawled like a little baby. Easy peasy 5-star. Our female main character, Tasana, is actually a slave. We see her escape slavery and we see her come to seek refuge with this group called the Order. She ends up getting teamed up with our reluctant hero, Max. Now, Max is kind of hiding away from some things that happen. He has sequestered himself in his little cottage and he wants nothing to do with the Order. But unfortunately, he kind of gets dragged back in. And watching these 2 characters kind of be on this healing journey together, incredible. They're so incredibly wholesome and so just sweet to each other. They're so kind to each other. I feel like we get a lot of enemies to lovers, a lot of rivals to lovers, a lot of conflict when we talk about romances and a lot of other fantasy romance at the moment. But these 2 characters are just so sweet to each other and it's so wholesome. The conflict in this book really comes from the plot and from the particular evil in this world. The style of big bad evil that we get is one of the scariest evils to me. And then we combine it with this really sweet, wholesome set of characters who are doing nothing but just rising up to this challenge. And it is so incredibly motivating. It is so incredibly sweet and wholesome, but also dark and just gut-wrenching at so many times. So reading book 2, I've been debating the last like 6 months between which of these 2 is my favorite. I think it might be Children of Fallen Gods, I don't know, but like also book 3 was absolutely incredible. I think in book 1, we get a lot of setup, okay? Book 2, we're dealing with the fallout from some of those things, but then we're also learning more details, and the way that we thought things were, they're really not that way at all. We get a lot more lore in this book. We get a lot more storytelling. We get a lot more plot that is explored. We get a lot more development in this book. And the way that I was really prepared for this book to go one way and then it went a completely different other way. Like, I love to be shocked. I love to be surprised. This book did it in spades. I was gobsmacked. I literally was pumping my fist in the air. Could not believe it was happening to me. Then we go into the final book in this series and the way that everything came full circle. When we got to the final scenes, I was a mess. I was an emotional wreck. I wouldn't say that this is necessarily a perfect book. I think some of the plot kind of it goes in places. We were a little extra with the plot in some points. However, the way that the found family elements yet again come in. This whole time Tasana has been escaping from slavery and she's been trying to seek a better world. Well, we get into the parts where she starts to create the better world and it is just incredible. Like the amount of emotional development that these characters had that we get to watch them go through, the amount of perfectness that they are for each other because they're both evolving as people. They evolve together, but they also evolve separately. I think that their connection is really incredible to watch. I think that the plot in this world, watching it go from where we started to where it is now, but then also creating these ideals of like what is a good place and what's a bad place and how do we as people, good versus evil is only good for us, but it can be evil for other people. And then watching that evil be evil for other people is just, it's insanity. The amount of perspective that we get across both of these books, it's crazy town. Krasnyaxi, the first half of it, I did really also like by Carissa Broadbent, but honestly, I feel like you're kind of either Krasnyaxi girly or you're a World Lost Hearts girly. I fear I'm a World Lost Hearts girly. Out of every book that I read this year, I think Project Hail Mary could questionably be a 6-star book for me. This series is a 6-star series. Nothing will ever beat Throne of Glass for me. However, I think this goes right underneath that. Now, having talked about my top book of the year, I do have a little something else that we need to discuss. There's always this weird little gap. If you film your best books of the year video before the actual end of the year, you may or may not still have some more books to read in that year. I wanted to read a book, okay? And I didn't want to not read this book. I've started Blood Over Brighthaven. I have been really wanting to read this book for a hot freaking minute, but ever since like mid to November, end of November, whenever I got this broken binding edition, I was like, I need to read it. With the BOOKMAS schedule, I spent a good, like 2, 3, 4 weeks prepping for BOOKMAS and then actually doing BOOKMAS and not necessarily reading a whole bunch. And by the time that I was done with BOOKMAS, I was craving reading in just like such a mood reader kind of way. But I didn't necessarily want to read just like anything. I wanted a big epic fantasy. I didn't necessarily need romantasy. Like I just wanted to read something big. And I just kept thinking, well, Blood Over Brighthaven would do that. Blood Over Brighthaven would do that. Hey, guess what? Blood Over Brighthaven would do that. So I did in fact pick this lovely little girl up last night. Currently 26% of the way through. I can already tell you that this book is like This book has to be featured somewhere on this list. Chapter 1, we are introduced to a character named Tomo. He is in this kind of refugee society. They are currently seeking safety from the Blight. We get to see what the Blight does and how that all works, and it is the most gut-wrenching, horrific, yet incredible opener to any book I've ever read. Like, it had me tearing up, and I had just barely started this book. I feel like I am someone who gets really connected to characters, but I don't tend to get super emotionally connected to them after I've seen them through some time. From the beginning of this book, was already down bad. So that was a really cool beginning. And then we actually switched POVs to our female main character, Siona. And I was kind of confused how chapter 1 then connects back to the rest of the book, but it definitely all does connect. But when we switch perspective to Siona, she is a female mage, and we were actually watching her take her test to become actually the first high mage in history, which is like kind of dope. However, unfortunately for Siona, we get to see that the reasoning behind why there's no females in this world, the societal expectation on women, we get to see that from not only the test that she has to take. She watches her peers take this test, then it's her turn, and her test is completely different and is 70 million times harder. But then even before that, we see her aunt getting her ready and sending her off for the day. And she's just saying these things like, oh, well, if you're gonna go meet the mages, you gotta wear something pretty, you gotta put on your little dress. And then her sister's like, well, hey, I guess if you fail this test, I guess you're not really disappointing anyone because no one's ever passed before. No females ever passed before. And so you as a reader are confronted with this rage that you are, you have this own rage for these characters on behalf of these characters. You get to see Siona be this character that's in a world that doesn't like her and that doesn't want her there. Her peers hate her. Her peers make her life miserable. Her peers are so cruel to her to a point where you're just like, huh? Hello? Excuse me? And you just get pissed. And I got pissed. But then we get to see Thelma come back into the picture. And he is a refugee, essentially, right? However, he's now been assimilated into this society as, he's a Quinn, is what they're called. And in this society, the Quinn are only there to work. They're only good if they can work. They're only accepted if they can work. They're overpopulated. And those dirty refugees over there, we don't really care about them. They're just, they're working. They're like doing their thing over there. We get to see not only this misogyny towards Siona, but then we get to flip the script and we see Thamel. He has all of this like ultimate racism, classism, just horrible things said about him, not only from other characters, but from Siona. And I think that is so, it's interesting to see because we're watching Siona take a lot of this internalized prejudice that she has been brought and raised to have against these other people over there. But then we see her confront that. And we watch Thamel because we're so connected to him from the beginning. And then we watch him kind of where he is now and seeing how other people perceive him. It's incredible. It is truly, it's such a clever way of framing these conversations. I think that we're not only exploring this anti-women narrative, but we're also exploring this anti, any person, people narrative. A lot of times when you explore these topics, I feel like we follow a person who is the minority against the world, and we kind of see that from one perspective, like we see racism or we'll see sexism, but then we less see two minorities then discriminating against each other. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's two, like Thamel, I don't feel like really discriminates against Siona for being a woman, but I feel like Siona definitely discriminates against him from the beginning, and she's kind of confronted with like, he's like literally just a guy. There's nothing wrong or weird about him. He is smart. He's able to assist me at this level. He's really understanding what I'm telling him. He's understanding the science and the magic behind what's happening here. It's this big joke that Siona is given Thamel as her assistant because he's a janitor, right? He doesn't know anything. So she is taking this expectation of her peers that she's going to fail, and she's like, well, we're not going to fail, so Thamel, you and I are going to boost it up. So while she originally is like, well, he's that Quinn over there, she then teaches him a lot of this magic. And I think that also discrimination, all those topics aside, the magic that we get in this world is actually really interesting. I at first was having a really hard time visualizing the system of magic that we've got here. It's very different as we are watching Sayona teach Thomal the magic system and how she's kind of trying to educate him to be her assistant. We get to see the magic system unfold, and I think the way that that is explained to the reader is really interesting. So far, structurally, this book, incredible. What this book has been saying so far, incredible. In fact, this is a standalone. We've got so much packed into the beginning of this book. I'm like, so where are we going? What's going on here? I don't trust anything. I'm really invested and I'm really curious to see where this is gonna go. I'm so angry at this book. I'm so angry at this world. I'm angry at these people. I'm angry at the society that is in this world. It's horrible. It's terrible. And I think the hardest part about it is we have the most ridiculous things that are going on, but it's all based on things that actually happen in the real world. And it's a dramatized version of it to an extent. And that extent is basically that we're having a lot of things compacted into one society, and we're confronting a lot of really terrible things that happen in our world all in one go. I'm outraged. I'm livid. I'm invested in these characters, but I'm also pissed off at these characters. Like, these characters are not perfect by any means. They have issues. They have been brought up in these societies that are so beyond problematic. And while they are learning how problematic certain things are, they are themselves still problematic. So they're learning and they're trying to do better, but like, they still kind of suck in the first place. So even if I really like this character, excuse me, like, what did you just do? Like, what are you telling me that you just said? Did you just open your mouth and say that out loud? Like, hello? Yeah, I am at a loss with how to feel, because I think part of the buildup of this book, I had no really understanding of what was going on in this book other than we had a female mage, and that was basically all I knew. I would recommend that to an extent. I would definitely, if you are interested in reading this book, I would recommend you be prepared to be pissed off. Like, you are confronted with some really powerful emotions from a lot of different directions that are all tackling very hard things, we could say. I'm having a very painful time, and I think what we are doing here is shedding a lot of light on a lot of perspectives of people in the world. And it's really interesting to see these characters who we are seeing them as main characters. We want our main character to be good, right? Like, we want to believe that they are moral, just, good people that are continuing to grow. However, we're watching these characters having to grow, and it's hard. And I think that we oftentimes in books, there's something to be said for reading self-insert characters. There's also something to be said for just assuming that the character is the most reliable narrator in a lot of cases. And while these characters are not unreliable narrators, they're still learning and they're still growing. And I think that there's something to be said for that. Like, there is something to be said for learning and growing, realizing that you're wrong. Even things that you so down bad believe to your core, they could still not be right. You can't just blindly trust things. You can't just have blind faith. You have to analyze what you believe in, but part of that is that you may change. What you learn about what you believe in may change. When you're confronted with something, it's really important that you take heed of what you are being presented and making sure that you are actually acknowledging what is happening and not just turning a blind eye to things. That is such a powerful statement that's happening in this book at the moment, and I'm just like, yeah. Anyways, it's like almost midnight. I'm gonna take off my makeup. I'm gonna lay in bed and I'm going to cry some more about this book. Well, folks, I accidentally read my favorite book of the year. I can't even begin to describe the overall feelings that I'm left with after finishing this book. I closed the book, I cried, I put it down. A couple hours later, I kept thinking about it. I went and actively searched out reading vlogs for other people reading this just to validate this experience that I had. And it was transformative. I feel like the best feeling and the most like descriptive word I could use about this book is transformative. We're watching these characters go through this experience and be transformed. It just drives you to do and feel the same. We're seeing a really small piece of this world, but we're getting some really big things. Like I feel like we got all that ever mattered in this world, which is insanity. However, this is the book that I'm gonna put down here, and I'm never going to stop thinking about it. I feel like the longer that I sit on this, the more that I marinate, the more that I percolate, the more that it's just going to just wow. I can't. Yeah, wow. When I originally filmed the outro to this video, I went on this whole rant about how I just felt like a lot of the books this year that I had read that I gave 5 stars were not actual true 5 stars. There were just a lot of vibes books, which is okay, but I just felt like I was waiting for something. I was waiting for Blood Over Brighthaven. And that is all of my favorite books from 2025. I feel like I have read some really standout books, but I also have had kind of not the best reading year. So it's interesting to go back and see out of the 5 stars that I gave, so many of them were just 5 stars, not necessarily like the most incredible 5 stars. However, I do think that this year I did have a lot of fun reading, and I'm so excited to move into 2026 with the intentions of reading this series, because if you look at the top books on my list, apart from the standalones, the books that were in series that were up on the top of my list were all of the books that I'd actually finished the series. So I'm so excited to move into 2026 and maybe find our next 5-star series. Anyways, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel to see what we get up to in the new year. But if you made it this far and wanted to let me know that you were here, go ahead and leave a star emoji. That is all for me for 2025, you guys. That is all for me from BOOKMAS. I had the most fun doing BOOKMAS videos. We are coming up on my 2-year booktube anniversary, and I'm getting really close to 2,000 subscribers, which is absolutely incredible. I did not think that that was going to happen this year. So first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for A, watching this video, B, watching any other videos I've done, C, subscribing, sticking around, and just hanging out and making this corner of the internet everything that I could hope it to be. So thank you so much for making 2025 such a great year. I think a big portion of it was booktube, and that would be you. So thank you so much for joining me and embarking upon this little reading journey. I'm so grateful, I'm so thankful, and I'm so excited to continue on into the next year. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this one. I hope you have a great rest of your day or night, wherever you are, and I will catch you in 2026.